Shiur is dedicated to Nishmas Rachalei Basra of Chaim Tzvi. We've been discussing the laws of Muktza, we had an introduction to the halachas of Muktza, then we started to look at different types of Muktza in a broad view, the difference between the Yisr of Tiltul Kalim, the Yisr of Muktza Machmas Gufo, and what we wanted to go into now is some of the pratim, some of the details of the halachos, the definitions of different categories of Muktza, how exactly we treat them. So we started to explore the category of Muktza called Kli Shemalachta L'Isr. We pointed out that the Shulchan Aruch in Siman Shin Ches Halacha Gimel tells us when it comes to the Yisr of Muktza, there's a category of a Kli whose prime tashmish, whose prime purpose is a prohibited function, and the Shulchan Aruch tells us that's going to be this din of Kli Shemalachta L'Isr. It's going to be mutter. He says Kli Shemalachta L'Isr mutter l'tatlo. You're allowed to move it. Again, those two major heterim, bein l'tzorach gufo or l'tzorach makomo. If you have this kli, again, what's our definition? Our definition is, the way most posts can bring it down, the Mishnah Berurah writes, is if rov tashmisho is l'isr, its primary function, its majority use is l'isr, even if it has a meaningful minority use laheter, that's going to be classified as a kli shemalachta l'isr. Okay? So an example is a hammer. A hammer is, primary use is for banging nails. It has a secondary use. You can use it for other purposes. You can perhaps use it to crack open nuts, but since its primary use 90% of the time is going to be to bang in nails, which is a prohibition of bona, so that will define it as a kli shemalachta l'isr. A pen has its primary use to write. It has a subsidiary use. Perhaps you want to point with a pen, you'll scratch a part of your back with the pen. In that case, yeah, it has a primary use, but 95% of its usage is l'isr. Therefore, it's classified as a kli shemalachta l'isr. Okay? And when you have such a kli, the halacha is you're not allowed to be metatal it, but with two major heterim. L'tzorach gufo, for its own sake, for a permissible use of the kli, that's mutter. And similarly, l'tzorach makom, if you need the space that it's on, that also would be permissible. What exactly is asur then? What can't you do with a kli shemalachta l'isr? So the Shulchan Aruch tells us, aval mecham or lotzeil, to move the kli. Not because you have a use for the kli. You don't want to use the kli. Just to go ahead and protect the kli, the hainu shenetzorach letatlo el bnei sheyarei sheyishaver or yiganev sham aser. If you want to simply protect the kli, it's sitting out in the rain, or it's going to get scorched by the sun, and you want to bring it inside, that will be aser because you're not doing it letzorach makom. You don't need the space, and you don't need the gufa kli itself either. You're not using it for anything. That is going to be us, and that's how we paskin the halach. We pointed out that the Mishnah Berurah has a very important kula, and the Mishnah Berurah says that if you are worried about losing your kli, and therefore you want to bring it in, that's your primary agenda, but you want to create a pretext in order to bring it in, you'll use it for something, even though your main purpose and agenda is to protect the kli, that's okay. Says the Mishnah Berurah, Sifkat and Tet Zayin, if you have also a machshava for tashmish of that kli, mutter l'tatel, you're allowed to bring it in. I feel igra kavanos mecham l'tzel, even though your primary purpose is mecham l'tzel. The rationale here is this is what we call in din a ha'arama. This is like a fiction, a pretext, which in general Chazal let us do when the underlying halach is only an Isser D'Rabbanan, where the din is a din D'Rabbanan, so then we generally allow pretext, even though your primary agenda is to bring it inside, but since you have a subsidiary agenda, secondary agenda for use of the kli, so we'll overlook your primary agenda, will allow this harama to take place. There is another important chumrah of the Mishnah Berurah when it comes to the din of l'tzorach makomo. The Mishnah Berurah does say that if you have, when it comes to the din of tzorach gufo, we said that if you want to use a hammer to crack open nuts, that's permissible. That's no problem. To go ahead and use, let's say, a pen, if you want to scratch your back, and that's what you would normally use to scratch your back, a pen, so that would be permissible. That's called l'tzorach gufo. You have a clock radio. Certainly to turn on the radio would be aser. Are you allowed to turn the clock radio so you can see what time it is? So that's going to be permissible because that's called l'tzorach gufo. You have a use of the clock. You want to see what time it is. That's a normal use of the clock. So with respect to moving it in that direction, that would not be a prohibition of muktza. You're allowed to turn it l'tzorach gufo. Comes along the Mishnah Berurah, and the Mishnah Berurah says over here in Siman Shin Ches that if, however, you have a kli shemalachta leheter, that is just as accessible to you as the Kli Shemalachta L'Isser, then one should not use the Kli Shemalachta L'Isser. If you have, for example, a nutcracker, you have on the table in front of you, you have a nutcracker and you have a hammer, and you want to go ahead and make a point to specifically use the hammer to show that the hammer is mutter, so the Mishnah Berurah says, no, if everything is equal and you have at your disposal a Kli Shemalachta L'Heter, then you're not allowed to use the Kli Shemalachta L'Isser. L'tzorah gufo, you should use the Kli Shemalachta L'Heter. So in that scenario, it is preferable, more than preferable. It would be also to take the hammer. You should take the Kli Shemalachta L'Heter. This is what the Mishnah Berurah points out in Sifkat Yud Beis, is that when we speak about the Heter Bein L'tzorah gufo, Mayri she'ein lo Kli